In the cradle of civilization, where two legendary rivers outline the map of history, lies the epicenter of an enigma that has puzzled humanity for millennia. How, from apparent nothingness, did the first civilization emerge? Here, in ancient Mesopotamia, the ghost of a revolution called Sumer whispers to us from the dust of time. This is not just the tale of an ancient people, it is the beginning of an inquiry into the exact moment when humanity took a monumental leap, igniting the spark of history itself. The setting of this drama takes place more than 6,000 years ago. Nomadic tribes, weary of a wandering existence, began to feel the call of the fertile land between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Small agricultural villages sprang up, oases of stability in an unpredictable world. The domestication of plants and animals gave them the power to thrive, but this progress contained an explosive question. What invisible force transformed these modest settlements into the first and powerful city-states on the planet? What decisions were made in the shadows that forever altered human destiny? The protagonists of this transformation were figures shrouded in legend, such as the enigmatic Gilgamesh, whose name resonates like an echo of power and ambition. Visionary leaders and communities forged in adversity began to erect a new order. But was it the need to manage resources and defend themselves that drove them? Or a much deeper and hidden ambition? With each clay brick and each irrigation canal, they were not just building a city, they were designing the very structure of power. Uruk, one of their most imposing creations, was not just a city, it was a living organism, a colossus of walls and temples that defied the desert. It became the magnet that attracted thousands of souls in search of a future, a melting pot of trade, faith and power. Its canals not only carried water but were the arteries of a burgeoning economic empire. The question that hovers over its ruins is inevitable. How did this mass of humanity remain cohesive in an environment of fierce competition, where each neighboring city was a potential rival? Amidst this whirlwind of growth, a tool destined to change the world was born: writing, a code of power inscribed on clay known as cuneiform. It arose from a practical need to record debts, harvests, and promises. But in the hands of a few, it became something much more. It was the secret language of administration, the key to organizing armies, collecting taxes, and dictating laws. Who were the first to wield this new weapon? And what truths did they deliberately conceal behind its complex strokes? The flourishing of these city-states unleashed a storm of tensions. The rivalry between Uruk, Ur, and Eridu became a saga of fragile alliances and bloody betrayals. The struggle for water, the lifeblood of this land, turned into a silent war that fueled open conflicts. The decisions made in the palaces during these tumultuous years not only sealed the fate of their citizens, but etched in stone the rules of a game that would continue to be played for millennia. The game of politics and war. The impact of this new era was total. A hierarchical social order was forged, where the specialization of labor generated an explosion of creativity but also opened chasms of inequality. An elite of priests and kings amassed unprecedented power, ruling over masses whose fate depended on their will. Social tensions began to simmer beneath the surface, threatening to explode the very civilization they had built. And here, at the dawn of history, we confront the central mystery of our journey. Was writing a gift to humanity, a tool for collective progress, or was it the perfect weapon to subjugate the masses? The ultimate instrument for a few to control many? The answer to this enigma could redefine our understanding of power itself and compels us to delve into the walls of these lost cities to uncover the secrets they hold. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. That dawn of civilization, however, was not without challenges. The initial tensions would soon give way to a new order in the prosperous lands of Sumer. On the horizon of ancient Mesopotamia, cities emerged that were not only refuges of life, but also complex networks of power and culture. Among them, Uruk and Ur stood out as beacons of civilization, where the pulse of urban life set the rhythm of an evolving society. Historical context: the 4th century before Christ witnessed an unprecedented flourishing in the Sumerian region. The city-states, organized in a mosaic of independent territories, began to establish themselves as political and social entities. This phenomenon did not arise from nothing. It was the result of the interaction of various factors, including intensive agriculture, which allowed for the sustenance of larger populations, and the development of technologies that facilitated the construction of complex urban structures. Uruk, with its monumental ziggurat and vast wall, rose as a symbol of power and ambition, while Ur, with its thriving trade and rich culture, became a nerve center of economic and social exchange. Tensions between these city-states were not uncommon. Alliances fluctuated and rivalries often led to conflicts. Nevertheless, it was in this atmosphere of competition and cooperation that the foundations of their social and political organization were forged. Key figures and decisions. At the heart of this web, figures such as Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, and Ur-Nammu, king of Ur, played fundamental roles. Gilgamesh, recognized for his strength and ambition, sought not only to expand his influence but also to leave a legacy that would resonate throughout history. His decisions, ranging from the construction of monuments to the quest for immortality, reflected the aspiration for power and recognition in a world where fame intertwined with divinity. On the other hand, Ur-Nammu implemented administrative reforms in Ur, seeking to stabilize his city through the creation of a legal system that facilitated the daily lives of his subjects. This approach to justice and order not only cemented his power but also left indelible marks on the legal structures that would follow in the generations to come. One might wonder to what extent these decisions were motivated by the ambition for power or by a genuine desire for prosperity for his people. Development of events. As time progressed, Uruk and Ur became epicenters of Sumerian life. The social organization was complex. At the top were the nobles and priests who not only directed political life but also dominated the religious sphere. The temples, dedicated to deities such as Anu and Enlil, were the nerve center of community life, where rituals were performed and crucial decisions affecting the city were made. The merchants, operating in bustling markets, played a vital role in the economy, facilitating the exchange of goods and establishing trade routes that connected the Sumerians with more distant cultures. Their decisions about what to trade and how to do so impacted the wealth of the cities and, consequently, the power of their leaders. Meanwhile, the farmers tilled the land, sustaining the economic base of these city-states. Their hard work allowed for the production of agricultural surpluses, which in turn fed the growing urban population. However, this social structure was not equitable. The inequality between classes became more pronounced over time, leaving many in the shadow of the splendor of the elites. Tensions between the cities did not cease. At times, Uruk expanded its influence over Ur, or vice versa, unleashing wars that devastated entire regions. These conflicts, although often motivated by the desire for power, also revealed a deeper enigma: the human yearning to transcend, to leave a mark on history, to be remembered. What truly drove these leaders? Was it personal glory or the well-being of their people? Immediate consequences. The impact of these dynamics was profound. The rivalry between Uruk and Ur, for example, not only shaped the political landscape but also influenced culture and religion. The construction of monuments and temples not only reflected devotion to the gods, but also the pride of the leaders in showcasing their power and administrative skills. The development of cuneiform writing, which began as a system for keeping accounts of goods and products, became essential for the administration of these complex societies. The ability to record transactions, laws, and significant events allowed for better organization and social control. But at the same time, it raised a question. Who were the true beneficiaries of this knowledge? Was it accessible to all or kept in the hands of a few? The enigma of the chapter. Thus, life in the Sumerian city-states vibrated in a delicate balance between order and chaos, between glory and oppression. The social and political organization that had been forged was marked by decisions that, although often appearing rational, were imbued with ambition and desire for power. However, a mystery remained. Was the advancement of civilization truly a symbol of progress, or a way to perpetuate inequality and control over the masses? As we delve into the next stage of our exploration, we encounter a fundamental aspect of Sumerian life that intertwines with this narrative of power: religion. How did the worship of the gods influence the decisions of leaders and the daily lives of citizens? This question will take us to the heart of the beliefs that defined Sumer and ultimately determined the fate of its city-states. This new social structure, vibrant and complex, was supported by an even deeper pillar, a yearning for connection with the divine. In the city-states of Sumer, where the winds of history whispered ancient secrets, religion emerged as the thread that intertwined the lives of men with the designs of the gods. Devotion to these deities was not merely an act of faith, but a vital necessity that defined the social structure and political power of the time. In an environment where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers irrigated the land, creating a fertile landscape, Sumerian society flourished in a context of constant interaction between the human and the divine. In this world, the gods were seen as the architects of existence, controlling natural phenomena and the vicissitudes of life. Each city-state, such as Ur and Uruk, venerated its own patron gods who were both protectors and judges of human actions. In this vast pantheon, Anu, the god of the sky, Enlil, the god of the wind, and Enki, the god of wisdom, stood as central figures, each representing fundamental aspects of the cosmic and social order. The decisions of Sumerian leaders were deeply influenced by this religious worldview. Kings like Gilgamesh of Uruk were not merely rulers, they were considered intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their legitimacy derived from their ability to fulfill sacred rituals and maintain divine favor. The construction of impressive temples such as the Ziggurat of Ur not only represented an architectural effort, but also served as a symbol of the political and religious power that held the community together. The daily life of the Sumerians was imbued with rituals and offerings. From agriculture to warfare, every action was accompanied by prayers and sacrifices. Priests, figures of great influence, played a crucial role in this dynamic. They were the custodians of esoteric knowledge and interpreters of divine desires, guiding the population in the pursuit of prosperity and well-being. However, this dependence on the sacred brought with it a burden. The constant pressure to meet the expectations of the gods, who could be capricious and severe. As Sumerian cities grew in power and complexity, religion also transformed. Tensions between the temporal power of rulers and the spiritual power of priests began to emerge, creating a delicate balance that could become unstable. The need for leaders to prove their worth before the divine intertwined with the ambition of priests to consolidate their authority, giving rise to intrigues that could trigger conflicts. Could it be that the Sumerian pantheon, in its diversity, also reflected the struggles for power among men? The development of Sumerian religion was, in many ways, a mirror of the evolution of its power structures. Over time, the myths and legends surrounding the gods began to be used to justify political decisions. The story of Enlil, who renewed the land after a devastating flood, was reinterpreted by rulers to legitimize their own actions, presenting themselves as saviors in times of crisis. This phenomenon not only intensified the people's devotion to their gods, but also consolidated the figure of the king as a divinely ordained leader. The consequences of this intertwining of religion and politics were profound. Wars, governed by the need to demonstrate valor and receive the blessing of the gods, became a constant in Sumerian life. Not only were military victories celebrated, but each defeat was seen as a divine punishment, a reminder that the wrath of the gods could fall upon men relentlessly. Thus, the Sumerians faced a dilemma. Were the gods truly responsible for their destinies, or were there more earthly forces at play? The enigma surrounding Sumerian religion intensifies when considering how this complex web of beliefs influenced the daily lives of its inhabitants. Festivals such as Akitu were not only religious celebrations but also served as moments of social cohesion where the community came together in an act of devotion and hope. However, in the shadows of these celebrations, the fears and longings of a people who, despite their devotion, could feel the shadow of discontent and uncertainty were also hidden. As the city-states continued to develop, the persistent question that permeated Sumerian life was, could men truly understand the will of the gods? This question, which resonated in the temples and in the hearts of the Sumerians, revealed a struggle between faith and reason, between the desire for control and the acceptance of the unknown. The influence of religion on the Sumerian power structure is undeniable, and thus the legacy of this interrelation has endured through the centuries. The echoes of rituals, beliefs, and power struggles still resonate in the study of history. However, the central mystery that persists is how these ancient beliefs shaped not only the lives of the Sumerians but also the foundations of later civilizations. What other secrets and enigmas await in the shadows of Sumerian history? With an eye toward the future, we will delve into the crucial role that temples and priests played in the economy and politics of Sumer, exploring how these bastions of power reveal even more about the complexity of this civilization. This devotion to the gods revealed a fundamental element in Sumerian life, the omnipresent influence of the temples and their priests. At the heart of each Sumerian city-state, the temples were not mere places of worship. They were the epicenters of economic, political, and social life. These architectural complexes, often imposing and adorned with intricate sculptures, stood as symbols of power and authority in an environment where divinity and humanity coexisted in an intricate manner. During the height of Sumerian civilization, the rivalry between city-states such as Uruk, Ur, and Lagash revolved not only around territorial expansion, but also around the control of the temples and, consequently, of economic resources. Religion was the backbone of Sumerian society. The gods were considered the true rulers of the world, and the priests acted as their intermediaries. This interrelationship between the divine and the earthly granted the temples a power that extended beyond the spiritual, transforming them into centers of wealth and political influence. The priests, from the high priests to the lesser priests, played a crucial role in the administration of the temples, which accumulated vast properties and riches. Through rituals and offerings, the temples became institutions that managed the local economy, controlling agricultural production and trade. The lands belonging to the temples were worked by peasants, who, in exchange for their labor, offered a portion of their harvest as tribute. This ensured a constant influx of resources into the temples, cementing their power and influence in Sumerian politics. Among the key figures in this narrative is King Gudea of Lagash, a prominent leader who, at the end of the 3rd millennium before Christ, is remembered for his devotion to the gods and his commitment to the temple of Ningirsu. Gudea not only took charge of restoring ancient temples, but also promoted the construction of new structures that symbolized divine power over the earthly. His famous stele, which shows Gudea being instructed by the deity, is a testament to how Sumerian leaders used their relationship with the divine to legitimize their authority. However, the power of the temples was not always undisputed. The rivalry between cities led to open conflicts, where the control of the temples was the primary objective. The wars between Ur and Lagash, for example, sought not only territorial expansion but also the domination of the temples and their riches. These struggles left a profound mark on the Sumerian psyche, generating a series of alliances and betrayals that further complicated the political landscape. But was it truly the devotion to the gods that fueled these conflicts? Or was there an underlying current of human ambition and greed? The development of these events culminated in a series of decisions that would redefine the balance of power in Sumeria as the city-states competed for control of the temples. Strategic alliances began to emerge where some kings chose to partner with priests rather than confront them. This shift in the power dynamic allowed some rulers to consolidate their authority by allying with religious institutions, transforming the temples into bastions of political power. Nevertheless, the immediate consequences of this interrelationship between politics and religion were complex. The accumulation of power in the temples brought significant economic growth, but it also led to corruption and abuse of power. The priests, having access to abundant resources, could influence political decisions, creating a system where devotion to the gods intertwined with the personal ambition of leaders. This complex web of relationships generated a cycle of dependency and conflict that would continue to shape Sumerian history. The enigma that persists throughout this chapter is, how could a system that seemed so deeply rooted in spirituality also be a breeding ground for ambition and conflict? The answer to this question lies in the shadows of Sumerian history, where gods and men intertwined in a dance of power, faith, and desire. As we delve into the next stage of our exploration, we encounter a crucial revelation: the birth of cuneiform writing. This invention would not only transform the daily lives of the Sumerians, but also establish a new means of communication that would forever change the way events, transactions, and human thoughts were recorded. What secrets still awaited in the depths of writing, and how would they influence the mosaic of Sumerian civilization? That interconnection between religion and power not only solidified the control of the temples, but also opened the door to a new, crucial episode in Sumerian history: the invention of cuneiform. In a world where communication was based on orality, the need to record transactions, events, and decisions became increasingly urgent. It was a time of change, where the echo of the first city-states resonated with the promise of a civilization in constant evolution. The historical context surrounding the invention of cuneiform was a mosaic of political and social intrigues. Sumerian cities such as Uruk and Ur were experiencing unprecedented growth. However, this expansion brought with it administrative challenges. The management of resources, the accounting of goods, and the need to establish clear laws demanded an effective means to document the growing complexity of society. The answer to this need would be found in a writing system that would forever change the course of history. Within this context, key figures emerged as crucial players in the creation of cuneiform. Among them, priests and scribes played a fundamental role. Acting as the guardians of knowledge, these individuals were the first to experiment with the graphic representation of ideas. Initially, writing began as pictograms, simple drawings that represented objects and actions. Over time, these symbols evolved, driven by the need for a more efficient system that could adapt to the complexity of spoken language. But who were the visionaries behind this transformation? The earliest examples of cuneiform writing date back to the 4th century before Christ, when the Sumerians began to use clay tablets to inscribe their pictograms. Each symbol was an attempt to capture the essence of an idea, an image that was meant to transcend time and space. However, as communicative needs diversified, these pictograms adapted, becoming signs that represented sounds and syllables. This evolution was a gradual process where each advancement built upon the foundations of the previous one. The events that led to the development of cuneiform were driven by the interaction between the ruling elites and the class of scribes. In this context, King Eonatum of Lagash, known for his conquests and his desire to organize his empire, was a key player. His administration promoted the creation of a system that not only facilitated the accounting of tributes but also documented laws and peace agreements. The famous Stele of the Vultures, which commemorates his achievements, is a testament to how writing became a tool of power and propaganda. But how many secrets lie hidden behind those symbols carved in stone? The evolution of cuneiform was not merely a technical advancement, it marked a shift in worldview. With each tablet that was inscribed, the Sumerians were sculpting their own history, from records of commercial transactions to mythical tales. Cuneiform writing became the vehicle of the collective memory of a civilization. However, this advancement did not come without its difficulties. The complexity of the system took time to consolidate, and not all sectors of society could access this new knowledge. In fact, the mastery of writing became a status symbol, mostly reserved for the elites and the temples. How did this affect the social structure of Sumer? The immediate consequences of the adoption of cuneiform were profound. The Sumerian economy experienced significant growth, commercial transactions became more efficient, and the ability to record information allowed for stricter control of resources. City-states began to flourish, and writing became integrated into all aspects of life. Protocols and laws were established, laying the groundwork for the development of a more formalized legal system. Nevertheless, despite these advancements, cuneiform also left a legacy of exclusion and hierarchy that would endure over time. As writing expanded, so did the enigma that this technology brought with it. What secrets did the tablets, which through the centuries became witnesses of the past, conceal? Cuneiform writing not only recorded daily life but also housed the aspirations, fears, and dreams of a society in constant evolution. The mystery of its interpretation and access to knowledge became a matter of power. The ability to read and write became a privilege, and with it, writing became an instrument of control as much as of communication. Thus, cuneiform was not merely a tool, it was a symbol of human ingenuity, a legacy that would endure beyond the fall of the Sumerian city-states. However, with each tablet that was written, more questions arose. How would other peoples adapt to this new system? What would happen when knowledge expanded beyond Sumer? The invention of cuneiform marked the true beginning of written history, a chapter that would resonate through the centuries. As writing spread and evolved, the mystery of its impact on humanity began to unfold. In the next chapter, we will delve into the intriguing world of scribes, those who became the custodians of this new knowledge, exploring how their work defined not only Sumerian bureaucracy but also the very fabric of history itself. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. This revolution in writing not only transformed communication but also created a new class of professionals whose influence would be fundamental in the consolidation of power in Sumer, the scribes. In a world where knowledge was power, these men and women would rise as the custodians of information, navigating a sea of clay tablets and styluses, and in their work they would become the invisible architects of Sumerian bureaucracy. The historical context of this period is decisive. The city-states of Sumer, such as Uruk and Ur, were at their peak, each competing for resources, territory, and above all, influence. The temples, as centers of religious and economic power, dictated daily life, while rulers and priests clung to their positions of authority. In this tumultuous scenario, writing emerged as a vital tool not only for recording transactions or decrees, but also for cementing the power of those who wielded it. What did it really mean to be a scribe in an era where every symbol could seal the fate of a city? The scribes were, in essence, the interpreters and guardians of the new Sumerian reality. Among them, some names would resonate through time, such as Enheduanna, the first known writer in history, who was not only a priestess but also an influential figure in the creation of hymns that advocated for the power of the goddess Inanna. Her work not only left a literary legacy but also consecrated the role of scribes at the intersection of religion and politics. The decisions of Enheduanna and other scribes determined the interaction between divine and earthly power. What secrets did her pen conceal, and how did her words influence the fate of Sumer? The development of events surrounding the scribes is an intricate and revealing plot. In the early stages, scribes were primarily men, recruited from the elites of society, those who could afford to receive education in the schools called eduba. These centers of learning, mostly located in temples, were sacred and reserved for future scribes. There, young students learned to master cuneiform, from the simplest pictograms to the complex sentence structures that would allow them to draft documents of great importance, such as accounting records, political decisions, and even poetry. As time progressed, the figure of the scribe became increasingly vital. In an era where trade flourished and administration required meticulous attention, scribes found themselves at the heart of commercial transactions. They were the ones who documented the arrival of caravans, the exchange of goods, and the collection of taxes. This work not only made them essential figures for the functioning of the economy, but also granted them significant power. Did they realize at the time that they were forging the destiny of a civilization? The immediate consequences of their work were profound. Writing allowed for the creation of permanent records, introducing a level of order and accountability in the administration of city-states. Bureaucracy became more sophisticated, and with it, the ability of rulers to exercise control. However, this power also came with risks. The growing dependence on scribes and their knowledge could be a double-edged sword. If a scribe decided to alter a record, or worse still, fell from grace, the repercussions could be devastating. What happened when truth became a mirage and the art of writing was distorted in the wrong hands? Thus, the enigma left by this chapter is deep. To what extent did the scribes shape not only the history of Sumer, but also the very concept of power and knowledge? In the shadows of the clay archives, secrets lie hidden that could change our understanding of the past. The story of the scribes is not just that of a few individuals, but of a class of professionals who, through their pen, sculpted the collective memory of humanity. As we delve into the next chapter, we will encounter the direct impact of this writing on the Sumerian economy. How did the invention of cuneiform transform the administration of trade and daily life? And what new horizons would it open for civilization? The answers await in the tablets, ready to be unveiled. The consolidation of scribes as figures of power marked an era of imminent transformation. As the cuneiform writing system took hold in the daily life of Sumer, administration and commerce prepared to enter a new dimension. The invention of an effective method for recording information not only represented a technological advance, it was the spark that would ignite the fire of a more complex and structured economy. In this chapter, we will delve into how cuneiform writing revolutionized administration and commerce in Sumer, unveiling a world of human interactions and decisions that shaped the destiny of a civilization. By the end of the 4th millennium before Christ, Sumer was at a critical point in its development. City-states such as Uruk and Ur had grown in size and complexity, and with this, the needs of administration became more demanding. Trade relations flourished, and with each transaction, the need for a more systematic record emerged. In this context, cuneiform writing emerged as the perfect tool to meet these demands. In an environment where goods were exchanged, sold, and transported, the ability to record transactions became a fundamental pillar for the Sumerian economy. The key figures in this story are the scribes, who became the guardians of knowledge and administration. They were attributed a special status, as their ability to read and write conferred significant power in a society where written communication was a privilege. These scribes were trained from an early age in temple schools, where they were taught not only to create cuneiform symbols, but also to understand the complexities of accounting and management. Their influence extended from tax collection to the drafting of commercial contracts, and their work became essential in the administrative machinery of the state. However, it was not all smooth sailing. The arrival of cuneiform writing also posed challenges and tensions. As scribes became figures of authority, merchants and farmers had to adapt to this new order. The ability to record debts and agreements meant that trade relations were no longer just a matter of personal trust, but were formalized in documents that could be used in disputes. Was this formalization truly an advance for all, or did it create new inequalities and tensions among different social groups? As writing integrated into the fabric of daily life, new dynamics emerged. City-states began to establish records of goods, inventories of products, and lists of debtors. With writing, administration became more efficient and transparent, but also more complex. The need to maintain accurate and up-to-date documents generated a bureaucracy in which scribes played a central role. However, the reliance on these records may have created a vulnerability in the Sumerian economy. The lingering question is, how was information managed in a world where writing was still an art in development? The development of the earliest forms of cuneiform writing coincided with the expansion of trade beyond the borders of the city-states. Trade routes multiplied, and with them the exchange of goods and cultures. Writing allowed merchants to keep track of transactions, establish agreements, and attest to the quality of products. However, this expansion also brought the challenge of competition. City-states began to vie for control of trade routes and resources, and writing became a tool for both promotion and propaganda. Inscriptions on temples and monuments often glorified rulers and their success in trade, creating a narrative that sought to consolidate their power. The decisions of Sumerian leaders also played a crucial role in this economic context. Rulers such as Uruk of Lagash and Shulgi of Ur implemented reforms aimed at improving administration and justice, reflecting the growing importance of written records. These decisions, although sometimes well-intentioned, often generated resistance among those affected. Reforms not only altered the balance of power between elites and citizens, but could also lead to social tensions. The echoes of these decisions still resonate in the history of Sumer, leaving a legacy of conflicts and reconciliations, as cuneiform writing solidified as an essential means for commerce and administration. Its consequences were felt in all corners of Sumerian life. The first banking institutions began to emerge, facilitating the lending of goods and the accumulation of wealth. Inscriptions on clay tablets recorded not only transactions but also interests and payment terms. This new written economy gave rise to an ascending commercial class while deepening social divisions. Who were the true beneficiaries of this emerging economy? The thriving merchants or the scribes documenting their achievements? The immediate consequences of this economic revolution were palpable. Life in the city-states was transformed. With an increase in wealth and social complexity, markets filled with products from diverse origins and interactions between city-states intensified. However, tensions also arose that threatened the stability of these communities. Competition for resources and the accumulation of debts began to generate conflicts among economic actors. Writing, in its essence, became a double-edged sword, a means to prosper, but also a catalyst for discord. The enigma that emerges from this transformation is profound. Cuneiform writing, in its capacity to record and organize the economy, also laid the foundations for the bureaucracy that could come to stifle ordinary citizens. To what extent did writing, in its pursuit of order and efficiency, end up creating a distance between leaders and their people? Or was it simply a reflection of the inherent complexities of life in a growing civilization? As we delve into the next chapter, we will explore a new aspect of cuneiform writing, its role in the creation of myths and literature. The narrative of the Sumerians was not limited to economy and administration. It was also imbued with stories that reflected their beliefs, hopes, and fears. In the following pages, you will discover how the Epic of Gilgamesh and other literary works became a mirror of Sumerian society, revealing hidden truths in the folds of time. This new written economy would soon transform into a cultural flourishing where writing, a newly born art, would begin to intertwine with the imagination of a people. In the heart of Sumer, amidst the effervescence of the first city-states, the first literary works emerged that not only reflected everyday life, but also wove myths and legends that would resonate throughout history. At this crossroads of the tangible and the ethereal, the Epic of Gilgamesh stands as one of the most significant works of ancient literature, an echo of human struggle across the centuries. When contemplating Sumer in the 3rd millennium before Christ, we find ourselves in an environment where economic prosperity and social complexity intertwined. Cities like Uruk and Ur were centers of trade and culture, where the elites accumulated power and the temples dominated both the spiritual and political landscape. Cuneiform writing, constantly evolving, was no longer limited to recording transactions or edicts. It had transformed into a means to narrate stories and preserve myths that offered meaning to human existence. This new language of symbols became a bridge between the divine and the human, allowing the Sumerians to explore universal questions about life, death, and the quest for immortality. Among the protagonists of this literary era, we find a prominent character, Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Known for his strength and boundless ambition, Gilgamesh becomes the hero of his own saga. The story, narrated on multiple clay tablets, begins with a king who, dissatisfied with his life, seeks to transcend his mortality. As the plot unfolds, the narrative addresses themes that resonate deeply within every human being: love, friendship, loss, and the pursuit of knowledge. But what decisions led him to this relentless quest? What shadows of his humanity pushed him to the confines of his existence? The narrative of Gilgamesh introduces us to Enkidu, a wild being created by the gods as a counterbalance to the tyranny of the king. His friendship with Gilgamesh not only humanizes him but also initiates a journey that will lead them to confront gods and monsters. Together, they embark on epic adventures, from battling Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, to capturing the celestial bull. These feats are not merely tales of bravery, they are reflections on the human condition, on the struggle against the inevitable and the desire to leave a lasting mark. However, Gilgamesh's path to immortality is also one of suffering. The death of Enkidu, his closest friend, poses an existential dilemma that transforms the king. The pain of loss drives him to seek Utnapishtim, the only mortal who has achieved immortality, on a journey through uncharted waters. This voyage, filled with symbolism and lessons, poses a central question: what does it truly mean to live and die? And furthermore, can a man, no matter how powerful, escape the fate imposed upon him by the gods? The earliest Sumerian literary works, and particularly the Epic of Gilgamesh, not only provided entertainment. These narratives became vehicles of knowledge and wisdom, transmitting moral and ethical lessons across generations. Sumerian literature laid the foundations for the written traditions of later cultures, becoming a beacon that illuminated humanity's path in its search for meaning. As writing expanded in Sumer, so did its capacity to capture the complexity of human experience. Myths and epics offered solace in times of uncertainty, creating a sense of community and belonging among the Sumerians. In a world filled with challenges and adversities, these stories became a refuge, a space where they could explore and make sense of their fears and aspirations. Nevertheless, not everything was simple in Sumerian narrative. The figure of Gilgamesh, despite being a hero, also embodied the duality of human nature. His arrogance and desire for power led him to questionable decisions, which often had devastating consequences. This internal conflict, this struggle between the desire for immortality and the acceptance of death, remains an enigma that resonates in the heart of every reader throughout history. Is a man's true legacy his name, or are the lessons he leaves behind? The cultural impact of the Epic of Gilgamesh was profound. Later civilizations, such as the Babylonians and the Assyrians, not only adopted this poem, but also reinterpreted it and incorporated it into their own literary traditions. The influence of Gilgamesh endured through the centuries, becoming a symbol of the archetypal hero that others would follow. Yet, the question persists: what secrets lie within the tablets that we have yet to decipher? What other tales from Sumer might contain forgotten truths about our humanity? In conclusion, the earliest literary works of Sumer, led by the Epic of Gilgamesh, not only enriched the cultural landscape of the region but also raised fundamental questions about human existence. Through its characters and narratives, Sumer left us a literary legacy that continues to challenge and fascinate current generations. But despite the richness of these narratives, the echo of their teachings and the mystery that envelops their depths lead us to reflect on the next chapter of this story. As the Sumerians continued to explore the limits of their knowledge and culture, A new dimension of writing began to take shape on the horizon. The next step in our journey will take us to a crucial moment in the history of Sumer, the emergence of the Code of Ur-Nammu, a written testament to the quest for justice and order in a world still filled with uncertainties. What moral and legal principles would be established in this era? The answer could change our understanding of civilization itself. This connection between writing and the daily life of the Sumerians not only transformed their administration but also paved the way for one of the most significant innovations in the history of civilization: the development of a legal code. In an era where justice was often arbitrary and depended on the power of leaders, Ur-Nammu, king of Ur, emerged as a central figure in the creation of a more structured and equitable order. Let us contextualize this moment in history. In the 21st century before Christ, Sumer was experiencing a period of flourishing and consolidation. The city-states competed with one another, but they also sought to establish alliances and maintain internal order. The growing complexity of social and economic interactions made evident the need for clear norms to regulate daily life, from family relationships to commercial transactions. In this context, the Code of Ur-Nammu emerged as a beacon of order, an attempt by Ur-Nammu to establish a system of justice that transcended the arbitrariness of power. Ur-Nammu, whose name is associated with justice, was not just a monarch. He was an innovator, a thinker who understood that to govern effectively it was necessary to establish a legal framework that promoted justice and equity. His decision to codify laws was pioneering and in turn reflected a deep understanding of the concerns of his people. In an environment where violence and injustice were frequent, his code promised a new dawn, one that would resonate through the centuries. The development of the Code of Ur-Nammu was not an isolated act but the result of a cumulative process. Before him, there were other forms of legislation, although not always written. In this sense, Ur-Nammu relied on previous traditions, but his approach was revolutionary. The laws he established were intended to be accessible and understandable, an attempt to give voice to all, not just to the ruling elite. The legal provisions covered a wide range of topics, from property rights to penalties for crimes, all with a clarity that sought to reduce confusion and abuse of power. Among the highlights of the code was the protection of the most vulnerable, a concept that, although fundamental to us today, was radical at the time. The laws stipulated, for example, that if a man caused harm to another, he must repair the damage in a proportional manner, which laid the groundwork for retributive justice. But who were the ones truly benefiting from these new laws? Was justice really accessible to all? Or were there shadows that still preserved inequalities? As Ur-Nammu promulgated his code, Sumerian society began to perceive a palpable change. The enforcement of these laws, however, was neither immediate nor simple. Challenges arose in their implementation and interpretation. Some local leaders, accustomed to exercising their power without restrictions, could see their interests threatened by the formalization of a legal system. Resistance soon manifested, posing a dilemma for Ur-Nammu: how to enforce a code that in theory promised justice but in practice could be undermined by particular interests. The immediate consequences of the Code of Ur-Nammu were profound. Although it established a precedent for justice, it also revealed the inherent tensions in any system of government. Disputes over the interpretation of the laws and their application began to arise, creating a power dynamic that did not always favor the weakest. The echo of these tensions was felt in the streets of Ur and in the hearts of its inhabitants. Could the Code of Ur-Nammu truly be the instrument of equity it promised to be? Or did it simply conceal beneath the surface a new type of control? The enigma of the chapter we are discussing lies in this duality. On one hand, the Code of Ur-Nammu represented a remarkable advance toward justice, an attempt to structure society based on universal principles. On the other hand, it raised questions about its real effectiveness in the lives of citizens. Would it become a symbol of justice or a tool of control? What secrets still awaited in the depths of this legal system that promised so much? As we reflect on these questions, it is essential to recognize that the legacy of the Code of Ur-Nammu was not limited to its time. Its influence would extend beyond the borders of Sumer, laying the foundations for legal concepts that would endure in future civilizations. The cuneiform writing that recorded it became a vehicle of knowledge, and the echo of its laws would resonate throughout history. In the next chapter, we will explore how these advances not only impacted the internal justice of Ur, but also intertwined with the agriculture of the region. Writing, which had been born as a means of record-keeping, was now becoming a vital tool for managing the resources of an expanding society. How would agricultural practices transform thanks to writing, and what new complications would arise from this interconnection? A new page in the history of Sumer is about to be written. The search for order and justice would soon extend to the fields of Sumer. The growing demand for food, driven by population expansion and the urbanization of city-states, required a more sophisticated approach to agriculture. In this environment of necessity, the Sumerians, pioneers in the art of writing, would embark on a new chapter in their history, where agricultural innovations would intertwine with their writing system, transforming the way they managed their resources and fed their people. The historical context of this period is fundamental to understanding the magnitude of the changes that were to come. By the year 3000 before Christ, Sumerian cities such as Uruk and Ur were in full bloom. The economy based on agriculture had reached a critical point. However, changing climate and pressure on natural resources began to threaten the stability of these communities. The need for more effective resource management became evident. Thus, writing, a tool that had initially emerged for accounting and administration, would begin to play a crucial role in the modernization of agricultural practices. Among the leaders who stood out in this transformation was King Uruk-agina of Lagash, known for his agrarian reforms and his focus on social justice. Uruk-agina, aware of the difficulties faced by farmers, made bold decisions that involved the creation of written records to monitor crops and the distribution of land. This practice was not only innovative, but also a testament to the power of writing in economic management. But how were these ideas implemented in a society that relied so heavily on tradition? The development of these events was not an instantaneous process, but a journey of experiences and discoveries. The Sumerians began to record the seasons of planting and harvesting, the varieties of crops, and the techniques used. Cuneiform writing became the vehicle through which this knowledge was documented. On clay tablets, scribes noted agricultural cycles, creating an archive that would serve not only for administration, but also as a reference for future generations. This radical shift in thinking about agriculture marked the beginning of a period of sustained innovation. In this context, the Sumerians not only managed their resources more effectively, but also began to experiment with new cultivation techniques, such as systematic irrigation. The development of canals and drainage systems allowed water from the Euphrates and Tigris rivers to be used more efficiently. Thanks to writing, the planning and implementation of these works became more organized and effective. It is intriguing to think that amid this agricultural revolution, writing could also have been a catalyst for conflicts over resource control. The immediate consequences of these innovations were profound. Agricultural production increased, which in turn fostered unprecedented population growth. Sumerian cities became filled with life, commerce, and culture. However, this boom also brought tensions. As arable land became more valuable, competition for it intensified. Writing, which had been an instrument of organization and progress, also served to record disputes and conflicts over land ownership and access to water. The enigma that arises from this chapter is deep. Was writing merely a means to manage agriculture, or did it become a weapon of control in the hands of the powerful? As records accumulated, so did tensions between social classes. Writing, in its essence, was a tool of power, and its evolution in the agricultural realm only highlighted its multiple facets. Looking to the future, we find ourselves at a crucial moment in Sumerian history. Innovations in agriculture not only changed the way the Sumerians cultivated the land, but also altered the very structure of their society. As city-states thrived, writing evolved in its use, acquiring a new dimension in diplomatic relations and treaties that would define the geopolitics of Sumer. The question that remains is, how would the Sumerians use this transformative tool in their interactions with other city-states? This new power dynamic would soon unmask a fundamental aspect of life in Sumer: diplomacy. In a world where city-states competed for resources and power, writing emerged not only as a means of communication but as a decisive instrument in the relationships between these cities. Those clay tablets, which housed the first signs of cuneiform, became carriers of treaties, alliances, and agreements that shaped the destiny of their nations. This chapter will immerse us in the use of writing as a diplomatic tool, revealing how written words could change the course of history. In ancient Sumer, the rivalry between city-states such as Ur, Uruk, and Lagash forged a politically charged environment filled with tensions. Struggles for supremacy were not only fought on the battlefield, the art of diplomacy became essential. Writing, in this context, transformed into a powerful ally, allowing leaders to negotiate, sign treaties, and establish trade relations. But what led these rulers to understand that words had the power to forge peace or unleash war? The main actors in this narrative were the ruling elites, figures such as King Gudea of Lagash, known for his wisdom and desire for prosperity, used writing to establish ties with neighboring cities. Gudea was not only a military leader, he was also remembered as a shrewd diplomat. Through tablets, he sent messages to his counterparts, offering alliances and promoting trade. The decisions he made were deeply rooted in the understanding that writing could preserve peace in a volatile world. One of the most significant episodes that highlights the use of writing in Sumerian diplomacy is the treaty between Lagash and Umma. This controversy centered on the possession of fertile lands along the border. After years of conflict, the leaders of both cities decided that diplomacy was the way forward. Through writing, a formal agreement was drafted that not only delineated the borders, but also established conditions for the shared use of resources. The tablet containing this treaty was not just a document, it was a symbol of civilization in its purest form, where words could build bridges or, conversely, erect walls. The development of these events in Sumerian history was significant. The signing of written treaties altered the course of relations between city-states, giving rise to an era in which dialogue and negotiation were valued as much as military strength. However, the impact of these actions was not limited to politics. It also affected the economy and culture of the region. Trade flourished as cities established agreements that ensured the exchange of goods and resources. Written words began to resonate not only in the palaces of kings but also in the markets and homes of ordinary citizens. Yet despite these advances, the paradigm of written diplomacy was not without conflicts. The shadow of distrust always loomed. Could treaties truly guarantee long-term peace? Written promises were, ultimately, just words on a tablet. In a world where loyalty was fleeting and power changed hands swiftly, questions persisted. What secrets still awaited in the depths of these agreements? Were words truly sufficient to prevent conflict? Or were they merely an illusion of peace? The enigma of Sumerian diplomacy lay in the duality of writing, its potential to unite and divide. As kingdoms expanded and relationships became more complicated, writing became both a refuge and, at the same time, a battleground of interpretations and misunderstandings. Treaties could be the subject of disputes, with terms being reinterpreted or ignored. The history of diplomacy in Sumer leaves us with a haunting question. Despite their ingenuity in creating such a sophisticated writing system, was Sumerian civilization capable of mastering the art of diplomacy? As the narrative of written diplomacy unfolds, it becomes evident that writing was not only a tool of communication, but a reflection of the complexity of human relationships. This enigma leads us to understand that although writing cemented alliances, it also exposed the fragile power dynamics that defined life in Sumer. Peace was a desired goal, but the path to it was always fraught with uncertainties. Thus, the history of Sumerian diplomacy invites us to reflect on the legacy of words. In a world where decisions were often made in a whisper and treaties were signed with the hope of a better future, writing remained a silent witness to human efforts to achieve harmony. However, could writing, in its purest form, truly change the nature of conflict? What lessons does this past leave us, and how does it resonate in the present? With each tablet discovered, the history of Sumer unfolds a little more, revealing not only its greatness but also its fragilities. The echo of those decisions is still felt in the contemporary world, where diplomacy remains an art in constant evolution. As we delve into the next chapter, we will explore the education of young Sumerians and how the learning of writing became a fundamental pillar of society. How were these ideas of diplomacy and power transmitted to new generations? The answer, as always in history, awaits discovery. The need for effective diplomacy sparked a profound change in the social fabric of Sumer. As the city-states grew in complexity, so did the necessity for an educated population capable of sustaining the bureaucracy and the new administrative systems that cuneiform writing had facilitated. In this context, a fundamental question arises. How were young Sumerians educated in a world where knowledge became power? In the dusty streets of Ur and Uruk, humble yet significant structures known as edubas rose. The first schools in history, these spaces, often adjacent to temples, were not only centers of learning but also places where the foundations of Sumerian identity were forged. Sumerian education reflected the social hierarchy. The children of nobles and priests had access to a more comprehensive education, while the children of farmers and artisans received a limited education focused on practical skills. The teachers, known as umya, were figures of respect and authority, responsible for shaping the minds of the next generation. What methods did they use to teach the youth? The teaching was a blend of rigor and creativity. Students, from a young age, immersed themselves in a world of clay tablets and styluses, where each stroke and each symbol came to life. Cuneiform writing, in its most primitive form, began as an echo of pictograms representing objects and actions. But as the young progressed in their studies, they faced increasing complexity. The first lessons focused on the memorization of signs and their meanings. In an environment of strict discipline, students spent hours copying characters onto clay tablets, repeating tirelessly until each symbol became an extension of their own being. Repetition was considered key, a means to internalize not only writing but also the traditions and history of their people. But was this a liberating learning process or a form of social control? The tablets, often filled with exercises and vocabulary lists, served as the canvas on which the dreams of a civilization were drawn. Through these practices, young Sumerians learned about mathematics, accounting, and in some cases, the rudiments of literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, a work that blended mythology and morality, began to resonate in their hearts, sowing the seeds of a rich and complex culture. However, teaching was not strictly limited to writing. The Umya also imparted lessons on morality and ethics, guiding the youth to understand their place within Sumerian society. Religion was interwoven into every aspect of education, as knowledge was seen as a gift from the gods and writing a sacred tool. Thus, each written tablet was an act of devotion, an echo of the connection between the divine and the human. The political and social environment surrounding these schools was equally complex. Sumer during this period was marked by rivalries among city-states, where education became a tool of power. Leaders, aware that an educated population could influence politics and economics, began to sponsor schools, leading to an increase in competition for knowledge. This dynamic not only fostered the creation of new educational institutions, but also intensified the struggle for prestige and influence. As generations of young Sumerians were educated, their skills in cuneiform writing not only opened doors within their society, but also allowed them to participate in political and economic affairs. The bureaucracy that sustained the city-states required men and women trained to manage records, contracts, and correspondence. However, this growing demand for knowledge also raised unsettling questions. Who were the true beneficiaries of this education? Was it a path toward progress or a way to perpetuate the class system? Events in Sumerian schools began to have consequences that transcended the walls of the Adubas. As the youth became scribes, their influence extended to all corners of Sumerian life. Nevertheless, this evolution also left a puzzle. Despite the apparent educational prosperity, how was it ensured that knowledge was used for the common good and not for the benefit of a few? The shadow of inequality loomed over education in Sumer. While some young people prepared to become leaders and scholars, others were relegated to secondary roles, trapped in a cycle of limitations that education could not break. The question persists: what legacy was being built in the classrooms, and at what cost? With the advancement of writing and education, Sumer found itself at a turning point. The seeds of knowledge had been sown, but the future of its civilization remained uncertain. Cuneiform writing had created new opportunities, but also new tensions. As young Sumerians ventured into the world of writing and learning, the echo of their voices resonated in a constantly changing landscape. As this chapter closes, a new question emerges. How would Sumerian knowledge expand beyond its borders? The next chapter will take us to explore the diffusion of writing and how this legacy intertwined with other cultures of Mesopotamia in a journey that promises to reveal hidden secrets in time. That quest for knowledge would soon extend beyond the borders of Sumer, leaving an echo that would resonate in the surrounding lands. During the 3rd millennium before Christ, Sumer became a beacon of civilization amidst the vast Mesopotamia. City-states such as Ur and Uruk flourished under an innovative administrative system in which cuneiform writing emerged as an indispensable tool. But how did this knowledge, this legacy, transfer to other cultures that, although distinct, were drawn to the light of Sumerian wisdom? The historical context in which this expansion of knowledge occurs is fundamental. Sumer, at its peak, was a place of cultural exchanges, where merchants and scholars traveled from one city to another, bringing with them not only material goods but also ideas and practices. The trade routes that connected the Sumerian cities with nearby regions such as Akkad and Elam became arteries of knowledge. As the cities of Sumer prospered, their influence spread, and cuneiform became a common language among those cultures seeking to emulate their success. Among the key actors in this dissemination were the Sumerian rulers, who, by establishing alliances and treaties with their neighbors, promoted the exchange of knowledge. One of the most notable was King Gilgamesh of Uruk, whose own epic journey not only took him to explore the boundaries of his kingdom, but also symbolized Sumer's desire to integrate other peoples into its cultural sphere. The decisions of these leaders were crucial. By inviting scholars and scribes from other regions to their courts, they created an environment conducive to learning and the spread of writing. As cuneiform was introduced into other cultures, its forms adapted and evolved. In the Acadian lands, for example, Sumerian cuneiform was transformed to accommodate the Semitic language, giving rise to a hybrid script that preserved the essence of the original but spoke the language of the Acadians. This process of adaptation was fundamental. Scribes, who had previously limited themselves to documenting Sumerian administration, began to record not only commercial transactions but also literature, poetry, and laws in their own languages. What nuances of Sumerian writing were lost in this cultural translation? The development of these events intertwined with the history of the city-states surrounding Sumer. As the Acadians, under the leadership of Sargon of Akkad, began to consolidate their own empire, cuneiform became a symbol of power and prestige. Sargon understood that control over writing meant control over knowledge. And thus, cuneiform spread north and east, reaching peoples such as the Hittites and the Hurrians, who adopted and adapted it to their own realities. The immediate consequences of this expansion were significant. Writing not only facilitated the administration of vast territories, but also allowed for the creation of laws and codes that regulated life in these new cultures. The Code of Hammurabi, which would emerge centuries later in Babylon, is a clear example of how the Sumerian legacy had deeply rooted itself in the collective consciousness of Mesopotamia. Thus, Sumerian knowledge transformed into a fabric that united diverse civilizations under a shared cultural legacy. But what challenges did these cultures face when adopting a writing system that, although powerful, also represented an administrative burden? The lingering enigma is the impact of this dissemination of knowledge. Was it truly a process of integration and improvement, or were there moments of resistance where local cultures felt threatened by Sumerian influence? The echo of this question resonates through the centuries, inviting historians to explore the complexities of cultural interaction in ancient Mesopotamia. The shadows of the ancient Sumerian city-states still hold secrets waiting to be unearthed. As we delve into the next chapter, we will witness how writing became an integral part of the daily life of Sumerian communities, affecting every corner of their existence, from accounting to personal correspondence. What revelations would this everyday interaction with writing bring? And how would this bond affect the identity of a people? The answer awaits in the pages of history to be revealed. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. The expansion of knowledge brought about unexpected and surprising changes. As tensions rose among the Sumerian city-states, a fundamental aspect of daily life began to take on a new meaning: writing. This tool, which had emerged as a system of accounting, started to intertwine with the fabric of daily life for the Sumerians, transforming not only trade and the economy but also personal relationships and the very culture of this ancient civilization. In this crucible of inventions, where the first city-states flourished in an environment of constant change, the use of writing evolved in revealing ways. In the political and social context of Sumer, writing became a means not only to record transactions and tributes, but also to communicate feelings, thoughts, and stories that would resonate through the centuries. The invention of cuneiform not only opened the door to bureaucracy, it was, in essence, an echo of the complexity of Sumerian life. The key figures who made this integration of writing into everyday life possible were, for the most part, the scribes. These individuals, trained in the schools of Sumer, not only mastered the art of writing, but also became the guardians of information and knowledge. Their work was vital as they facilitated communication between the administrators of the cities and their citizens, as well as among different city-states. As the economy expanded, the need for documentation grew, and thus the scribes became indispensable figures in the new social order. The decisions of the ruling elites, for their part, also played a crucial role in the expansion of the use of writing. The kings and leaders of Sumer, aware of the importance of having a clear record of their achievements and the tributes they received, encouraged the creation of documents that attested to both their victories in battle and peace agreements. Thus, writing became a symbol of power and legitimacy, a means to solidify their authority before their subjects and rivals. As the days passed in the cities of Ur, Uruk, and Lagash, writing permeated all aspects of life, from the clay tablets that detailed harvests and inventories of goods to the personal letters exchanged between lovers or friends. Each inscription was a testament to Sumerian life. Writing was not only used for administrative purposes, it also became a vehicle for personal expression. Letters sent by a lover to their partner, messages of encouragement between friends, or even complaints directed at an official revealed the more human side of a civilization that had been considered until then as cold and distant. However, despite this appearance of order and progress, the use of writing also raised unsettling questions. How was intimacy preserved in a world where every word could be inscribed on a tablet for eternity? What happened to the secrets and desires that could not be expressed openly? Writing, in its duality, could be both a bridge and a barrier. Thus, while some found in it a way to communicate with the world, others could experience a sense of vulnerability. The development of writing in the daily life of the Sumerians was not without conflicts. The tensions between the city-states, fueled by economic and political competition, also found their reflection in written words. Letters of war, peace treaties, and records of disputes were constant reminders that writing, although powerful, could not prevent conflict. All of this contributed to an enigma that persisted in the shadows. Could writing truly unite a people or, on the contrary, serve to divide them even further? The immediate consequences of this integration of writing into daily life were profound. Administration became more efficient and bureaucracy more structured, allowing the city-states to manage their resources more effectively. Trade relations flourished, and in turn, a system of communication was consolidated that transcended borders. However, the increase in bureaucratic control also meant that the private lives of citizens could be observed and, in some cases, manipulated by those in power. The question that lingers after this analysis is, how did writing truly affect Sumerian identity? Did it become a tool of liberation or a chain that limited individual expression? The use of writing in the daily life of the Sumerians left a complex legacy, one that continues to resonate in the history of humanity, provoking reflections on the balance between communication and privacy, power and vulnerability. As the history of Sumer progresses, the tensions between power and daily life intensify, leading to an unexpected turn in the narrative. In the next chapter, we will delve into the phenomenon of the Fall of Uruk, exploring how writing and bureaucracy, which were once sources of strength, could become the backdrop of its decline. Thus, the echo of history continues, inviting us to uncover the mysteries that still await in the depths of ancient Mesopotamia. The growing complexity of daily life would soon manifest tangibly in the most emblematic city-states of Sumer, among them Uruk, the beating heart of Sumerian civilization, known for its monumental ziggurat and extensive walls. Uruk was a symbol of power and culture in the ancient world. However, as time progressed, shadows began to lengthen over its splendor. This chapter delves into the mystery of the Fall of Uruk, exploring the forces that led to its decline and that of other Sumerian city-states. The historical context preceding the fall of Uruk is complex and multifaceted. For centuries, Uruk had flourished, driven by its ability to innovate in agriculture, trade, and administration. Nevertheless, challenges were brewing on the horizon that threatened its stability. Demographic pressure, fueled by unchecked population growth, began to deplete natural resources. In turn, rivalries between city-states intensified, creating an atmosphere of tension and conflict. The increasing competition for fertile lands and trade routes became a breeding ground for discord. The figures who would play a crucial role in this narrative of decline are many. But among them stands out the king of Uruk, whose figure would become emblematic during this period of crisis. The figure of Enmerkar, a legendary monarch, represents an era of greatness but also of decisions that would lead the city toward ruin. In his quest to expand the reach of Uruk, Enmerkar became embroiled in a series of conflicts with other city-states such as Lagash and Eridu, his decisions motivated by the desire for power and control. Not only exacerbated rivalries, but also led to a drastic militarization of the city. The unfolding of events that led to the fall of Uruk is a tale of missteps and devastating consequences. In the early decades of the 3rd millennium before Christ, Uruk was at the height of its power. However, the pressure exerted by neighboring cities, along with the depletion of its resources, began to wear down its capacity for resilience. The military campaigns of King Enmerkar, although initially successful, soon became a burden. Resources allocated for war diminished investment in infrastructure and agriculture, weakening the city's economy. As tensions rose, alliances broke, and new conflicts emerged. The rivalry with Lagash intensified, culminating in confrontations that drained both cities. However, Uruk could not afford to lose more, and the cycle of conflict and scarcity intensified. Enmerkar's decision to mobilize his army in prolonged campaigns, far from being a strategy of expansion, became a trap that exhausted the city's resources and left its population vulnerable. The immediate consequences of these events were devastating. Uruk began to lose its status as a center of trade and culture. The people, worn out by war and scarcity, started to abandon the city in search of better opportunities in other regions. The population, which had once lived in a bustling urban center, drastically diminished, leaving Uruk at the mercy of its own decay. The glory of its temples and palaces became a distant echo as the city sank into an unsettling silence. But what secrets lie in the ruins of Uruk? Was the fall of this powerful city an inevitable fate? Or were there decisions that could have changed its course? The enigma of its decline looms over historians like a shadow, raising the question of whether the actions of a single person can have the power to drag an entire civilization down with them. As we delve into the next chapter, we will focus on the legacy of cuneiform writing and how, despite the fall of Uruk, this writing system endured and transformed over the centuries, leaving an indelible mark on the history of humanity. The fall of the great cities did not signify the end of their greatest invention. The legacy of Sumeria would endure far beyond its walls, and at the heart of this legacy lay cuneiform writing, a system that not only transformed communication but also laid the foundations for civilization as we know it. As the shadows of the great temples and palaces lengthened, one could glimpse the profound impact that this ingenuity would have on later cultures. In the historical context surrounding the invention of writing, Sumeria was a land of innovations and constant changes. The city-states competed with one another, not only for territorial control but also for cultural and technological advancement. Cuneiform writing, developed from simple pictograms, had become the means through which transactions, laws, and narratives were recorded. It was a vehicle of power and knowledge, a means to perpetuate the collective memory of a people that was in constant evolution. However, the end of the Sumerian era did not mean the decline of writing, but rather its transformation and expansion. The legacy of writing cannot be understood without mentioning the key figures who played a fundamental role in its dissemination. Kings such as Ur-Nammu and his successor Shulgi not only promoted its use in administration and justice, but also encouraged its teaching in schools, forming a new class of scribes who would carry knowledge beyond Sumerian borders. These figures were not just leaders, they were visionaries who understood that writing was the thread that would connect future generations with the past. Was writing truly an exclusively Sumerian creation, or did its essence seep into neighboring cultures, transforming into a regional phenomenon? Over time, the Sumerian cities succumbed to invasions and internal crises, but cuneiform, that enigmatic script, found a new home in the hands of the Acadians. The interaction between Sumerians and Acadians was not only military but also cultural. As the Acadian Empire expanded, cuneiform adapted, incorporating new signs and sounds, thus reflecting the evolution of a living language. This period of cultural exchange brought forth an era of literary flourishing, where works such as the Epic of Gilgamesh resonated on clay tablets, crossing borders and generations. The question that arises is, to what extent did this exchange enrich the Sumerian legacy, and how many secrets remained hidden in the inscriptions of those ancient tablets? The unfolding of events that marks this chapter of history intertwines with the expansion of writing in the context of the Acadian Empire. It was not merely a simple adoption, it was a reinterpretation that allowed cuneiform to become a symbol of power and legitimacy. Acadian kings, such as Sargon, used writing to consolidate their control and leave an indelible mark on history. Administration became more efficient, treaties were written and signed, and literature flourished. All thanks to a tool that had emerged in the plains of Sumeria. The immediate consequences of this evolution were profound. As writing took root in Acadian culture, a phenomenon of cultural synthesis also occurred. Sumerian influence remained alive through writing, while Acadian traditions emerged, creating a cultural mosaic that would shape future Mesopotamia. However, this process was not without conflicts. The struggle for power among different city-states persisted. And writing, which had been an instrument of communication, also became a tool for propaganda and legitimization of power. What secrets did these inscriptions conceal, and how did they shape the rulers' perceptions of their own legacy? The enigma surrounding the legacy of cuneiform writing is not limited to its immediate impact on Sumeria and Akkad, but extends to the civilizations that came afterward, the Hittites, the Phoenicians. And eventually the Greeks would all be influenced by the writing system that had emerged in Sumerian lands. Writing became a bridge between cultures, a means that facilitated the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and knowledge. However, the question always remains, what part of the Sumerian essence was lost in translation through the centuries and cultures? The legacy of cuneiform writing, therefore, is not just a chapter in the history of Sumeria, but becomes a continuous thread that links various civilizations. The ability to record and transmit information would be the spark that ignited the flame of knowledge in antiquity, marking the path toward the modern world. This journey through time leaves us with a mystery. How could such a simple invention as writing provoke such a radical change in the history of humanity? With the echo of these questions resonating in our minds, it is imperative to prepare the ground for the next chapter. The influence of cuneiform writing did not stop in Sumeria or Akkad. Its imprint extended throughout the borders of history. In the next chapter, we will delve into the interaction between Sumerians and Akkadians, and how this relationship profoundly affected the evolution of writing. What new mysteries will this journey reveal? The legacy of writing would soon open the doors to a new chapter in the history of Mesopotamia, where the enigma of cuneiform would intertwine with the formidable presence of the Akkadians. In a context of growing cultural and political interactions, the Sumerians, with their vast experience in the development of writing, found themselves at a crossroads. The Acadian influence, spreading like an echo in the valleys of ancient Mesopotamia, would begin to shape not only politics but also the very essence of writing. During the 3rd millennium before Christ, the political landscape of Mesopotamia was a mosaic of Sumerian city-states and the emerging Akkadian communities. As the Akkadians, a Semitic people, began to expand their influence, the interaction between both groups became inevitable. The city of Akkad, under the leadership of Sargon the Great, would be the epicenter of this transformation. Sargon, a visionary and unifying king, knew how to harness the cultural diversity of his surroundings, and in his quest for power, integrated the Sumerians into his empire. This fusion of cultures was not merely an act of conquest, but a complex web of cooperation and exchange that would shape history. The Akkadians, with their language and traditions, found themselves on one hand drawn to the rich Sumerian heritage and on the other determined to establish their own identity. This process of acculturation not only affected politics and religion, but also had a profound impact on writing. While the Sumerians continued to refine their cuneiform, the Akkadians began to adapt and simplify this writing system, creating a bridge between two worlds. Writing, once a privilege of the few, started to expand, becoming a vehicle of power and communication for the new political order. As the Acadian influence grew, the Sumerians did not remain passive. Instead of being absorbed, they began to integrate Akkadian elements into their own culture. This phenomenon was clearly observed in the administrative records and literary texts that emerged during this period. The Akkadian language, with its different grammatical structure and rich phonetics, began to appear in cuneiform inscriptions, generating a dialogue between the two civilizations. Was it truly a simple cultural exchange, or was there something deeper at play? Writing became a symbolic battleground, where each symbol and each stroke told a story of rivalry and collaboration. Among the key figures of this period, Sargon the Great stood out not only as a conqueror, but as a visionary who bet on cultural unification. His legacy was solidified by his successors, who continued to promote the blending of traditions. Naram-Sin, his grandson, projected himself as a divine ruler, using writing to consolidate his image and authority. In his inscriptions, he proclaimed his divinity and his connection with the gods, using cuneiform to leave an indelible mark on history. However, his reign also posed a dilemma: how to balance Akkadian identity with the profound Sumerian legacy that had been the pillar of Mesopotamian civilization. The arrival of the Akkadians also brought a change in the role of scribes. Previously, Sumerian scribes were the guardians of knowledge, but with Acadian influence, their role expanded. They became intermediaries in the complex administrative network of the new empire, using cuneiform to record not only commercial transactions, but also acts of war, treaties, and of course the literature that began to flourish in this new environment. Writing, in this context, transformed into an instrument of power, used by rulers to validate their authority and perpetuate their legacy. However, this period of interaction was also marked by tensions and conflicts. The Akkadians and Sumerians did not always coexist peacefully. Struggles for control of resources and territories were common. In this environment of uncertainty, cuneiform writing not only reflected achievements but also the fears and aspirations of both peoples. On clay tablets, one could read accounts of wars, betrayals, and fleeting alliances. History became a battleground where each inscription was a testament to the struggle for supremacy. The immediate consequences of this interaction were profound. Cuneiform writing diversified, adapting to new realities and needs. Akkadian, as a written language, began to gain ground, and its use spread beyond the borders of Akkad. As Sumerian and Akkadian traditions intertwined, cuneiform writing became a symbol of political and cultural power. But did the Akkadians truly manage to completely overshadow the Sumerian heritage, or was this a fusion that enriched both cultures? The enigma surrounding this chapter of history centers on questions of identity and legacy. The transition of power from the Sumerians to the Akkadians was more than a simple change of rulers. It was a moment when writing itself became a witness to human complexity. As the Akkadians borrowed elements from Sumerian culture, writing transformed, but the echo of the ancient Sumerians never completely disappeared. In a world where power was largely defined by the ability to communicate and record, who truly took the lead? As the chapter of Acadian influence comes to an end, we find ourselves at a new threshold. Writing, now richer and more diverse, would begin to play a crucial role not only in daily life but also in the realm of knowledge and science. What new mysteries awaited in the depths of cuneiform? And how would this written legacy influence advancements in astronomy and mathematics in Sumer? The history of writing, with its twists and surprises, was just beginning to unfold. The fusion of cultures would soon reveal the hidden secrets that lay in the shadows of Sumerian civilization. The invention of cuneiform writing not only transformed administration and commerce, but also opened the doors to a new world of knowledge, where astronomy, mathematics, and medicine flourished in a fertile environment of curiosity and reflection. As writing settled into daily life, the Sumerians began to record their observations of the starry sky, the cycles of nature, and the mysteries of the human body, laying the foundations for scientific disciplines that would endure through time. In the historical context of Sumer, the rise of city-states marked a period of intense intellectual activity. The ruling elites, aware of the importance of precise administration and specialized knowledge, fostered the development of education and research. Each city, from Uruk to Lagash, became a center of knowledge, where astronomers, mathematicians, and physicians came together to unravel the enigmas of the universe. Among the key figures of this era was King Uruk-agina of Lagash, who, at the end of the 3rd millennium before Christ, implemented reforms that promoted the well-being of his people and the pursuit of knowledge. Uruk-agina not only sought social justice but also encouraged the study of astronomy, a field that attracted the Sumerians for its ability to predict natural events and, therefore, influence agriculture and daily life. Writing became an essential tool for recording astronomical observations, allowing the sages of Sumer to compile data on the movements of planets and constellations. The decisions of kings and priests were crucial in the development of mathematics. The Sumerians, with their sexagesimal numerical system, laid the groundwork for complex calculations that would facilitate trade and construction. Cuneiform writing enabled the creation of mathematical tables that documented everything from commercial transactions to land measurements. The scribes trained in the interpretation of cuneiform became the guardians of this knowledge, spreading mathematical understanding throughout Mesopotamia. As writing integrated into the medical field, the Sumerians began to record not only treatments, but also symptoms and diseases. Medical texts such as the Compendium of Diagnoses and Prognoses reflect the evolution of medical thought and the meticulous observation of symptoms. Writing, therefore, not only preserved knowledge but also amplified it, allowing for an exchange of ideas that transcended the borders of city-states. The development of science in Sumer was not without challenges. Although the advancements were significant, there remained a persistent enigma. How could the Sumerians, with their technological limitations, make such precise and complex observations? The answers to this question lead us to consider the possibility that behind each discovery, there was not only ingenuity, but also a profound connection to the sacred. Astronomy in particular intertwined with religion, turning the stars into gods and their movements into omens. The immediate consequences of these developments were profound. The ability to foresee floods, for example, allowed the Sumerians to adapt their agricultural practices, ensuring the sustenance of their communities. Writing also enabled the creation of a scientific legacy that would be passed down through generations, influencing later cultures such as the Babylonian and the Assyrian. Each cuneiform tablet written was an echo of knowledge that defied time, a testament to humanity's relentless quest to understand its surroundings. However, the enigma persists. As the Sumerians advanced in their understanding of the cosmos and the human body, was their success the result of collective ingenuity, or was there something more, something that was lost in the folds of history? The answers, like many others in the history of Sumer, remain in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed by those who dare to explore their secrets. As we delve into the next phase of the Sumerian narrative, it is crucial to understand how writing not only impacted science but also left an indelible mark on art and culture. In the next chapter, we will explore the relationship between writing and artistic expressions, revealing how these two forces intertwined to give life to a civilization rich in creativity and symbolism. What artistic secrets awaited in the cuneiform tablets, and how did they reflect the soul of a people that sought, through writing, to leave its mark on time? The flourishing of science would soon lead the Sumerians to a new horizon, where writing, more than a mere means of communication, would become the bridge to art and cultural expression. In the heart of Sumer, as the city-states grappled with political and economic instability, a new paradigm emerged. Cuneiform writing, which had transformed bureaucracy and administration, also began to leave its indelible mark in the artistic realm. In this chapter, we will delve into the relationship between writing and artistic expressions in Sumerian culture, a link that has captivated historians and archaeologists alike. The historical context in which this synergy developed is revealing. During the 3rd millennium before Christ, Sumer was a mosaic of city-states, each with its own identity, ruler, and often rivalries. Uruk and Ur, for example, were epicenters of innovation. Sumerian culture flourished, driven by advances in agriculture and trade. However, the environment was also marked by competition among these cities, fostering a constant quest for prestige and recognition. In this context, writing served not only for the accounting of goods or the drafting of laws. It transformed into a powerful medium of artistic and cultural communication. The key figures of this era are numerous, but among them stand out the kings and priests, who were not only political leaders but also patrons of the arts. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, is an emblematic figure. His legend, immortalized in the Epic of Gilgamesh, transcends time and reveals how art and writing could intertwine to narrate stories of heroism, love, and the quest for immortality. Through writing, Gilgamesh left not only a political legacy, but also a rich literary tradition that would resonate through the centuries. The decisions made by these leaders were crucial. By fostering the creation of temples and public spaces, they sought not only the religious and political well-being of their citizens, but also promoted artistic expression. The cuneiform inscriptions on the walls of temples and palaces were not mere annotations. They were declarations of power, history, and culture. Likewise, the training of scribes, which included the teaching of literature and poetry, reflected an awareness that writing could be used as a vehicle for cultural greatness. The evolution of events in this realm is rich and significant. In the early stages, cuneiform writing began to be inscribed on everyday and administrative objects. However, it quickly expanded to the creation of literary works that captured the essence of the human experience. The Epic of Gilgamesh not only emerged as a literary masterpiece, but also became a reflection of Sumerian identity. The clay tablets that carried these stories became the canvases of a new art that fused storytelling and writing, bringing to life characters that still inspire us today. Sumerian art also manifested in sculpture and painting, where representations of gods, men, and scenes of everyday life intertwined with cuneiform inscriptions. Decorated pottery and stone reliefs were mediums through which writing integrated into the aesthetic experience, transforming utilitarian objects into carriers of cultural meaning. Writing, in this sense, became an omnipresent element that provided depth and context to images and sculptures, creating a dialogue between word and form. The immediate consequences of this interrelation between writing and art were profound. The creation of literary and artistic works not only provided a sense of collective identity, but also consolidated the power of rulers and the influence of temples. Sumerian culture, with its rich tradition of epic narratives and artistic expressions, became a symbol of prestige that resonated beyond its borders. The kings and priests who supported these artistic initiatives sought not only the worship of their gods, but also the recognition of their achievements in a world where history was told through writing. Nevertheless, despite this splendor, the enigma persists. To what extent could writing and art be used as tools of social control? Were artistic expressions a form of resistance against political oppression, or merely a reflection of the prevailing ideology? These questions invite us to reconsider the narrative of Sumerian culture, where each figure and every word inscribed in clay could contain more than one meaning, more than one secret. The relationship between writing and art in Sumer is therefore a mirror of its social and cultural complexity. As we explore the echoes of its legacy, we are faced with the certainty that each inscription, each work, was an act of memory, an attempt to transcend the transience of life and power. But what secrets still awaited in the depths of these tablets and sculptures? The answer may lie in what is to come. As the power of the city-states was reconfigured, writing would continue to evolve, adapting to new dynamics of power and culture. The rise of Babylon was approaching, and with it, a new era of transformation. Writing, an art in itself, would play a crucial role in the consolidation of this new empire. In the next chapter, we will observe how this rise intertwines with the history of writing and the legacy it left in its wake. Political instability would soon open the doors to a new chapter in the history of Mesopotamia. As the Sumerian city-states weakened, the shadow of Babylon began to cast its influence strongly over the region. A city that, although it had not yet reached its peak, already displayed glimpses of greatness that promised a bright future. In this context, cuneiform writing, already mature and widespread, would play a crucial role in the transition of power. As the 18th century before Christ approached, the geography of Mesopotamia experienced significant changes. Internal struggles and external invasions wore down the city-states of Sumer, leaving a power vacuum that would soon be exploited. Babylon, strategically located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, stood as a beacon in the twilight, capturing the attention of merchants, warriors, and leaders alike. The political atmosphere became tense. Alliances and enmities were woven into an intricate tapestry that would ultimately change the fate of the region. In this context, Hammurabi, the sixth king of Babylon, emerged as a central figure. Known for his political and military cunning, Hammurabi aimed not only to consolidate his power in Babylon but also dreamed of unifying all of Mesopotamia under his command. Writing, a Sumerian legacy, became his most powerful ally. Through written decrees, Hammurabi established a legal system that not only regulated daily life but also cemented his authority. His famous code, inscribed in stone, was not merely a set of laws, it was a declaration of his power, a way to perpetuate his legacy in the collective memory. But what led Hammurabi to adopt writing as an essential tool in his rise? The use of cuneiform allowed him to communicate effectively with his subjects and establish stronger control over an expanding territory. Inscriptions on clay tablets became the means to proclaim military victories, establish alliances, and above all, to dispense justice. In this way, writing transformed into a link between the king and his people. A bond that, although fragile, was vital for the cohesion of an emerging empire. The development of events in Babylon was swift and decisive. In his quest to expand his influence, Hammurabi orchestrated a series of military campaigns that resulted in the conquest of rival city-states, such as Larsa and Eshnunna. Each victory not only increased his territories but also solidified his reputation as a formidable leader. Cuneiform writing played a fundamental role in the propaganda of his achievements. The tablets narrating his exploits, carefully distributed, served to inspire loyalty and fear in equal measure. However, the rise of Babylon was not without challenges. The consolidation of power around Hammurabi involved the need to confront internal and external rivals. Writing, when used to record alliances and treaties, also revealed the tensions and betrayals that could arise at any moment. The very tool that cemented his authority could become a double-edged sword. The immediate consequences of this process were profound. The unification of Mesopotamia under Hammurabi not only transformed the political landscape but also spurred a cultural and economic renaissance. Trade routes flourished, and writing became the vehicle for the exchange of ideas, goods, and knowledge. The daily life of the Mesopotamians was deeply influenced, with cuneiform recording everything from commercial transactions to religious events. But what secrets and shadows did this new Babylon conceal? The transition of power was not merely a change of leaders, it was a change in the very identity of the region. The story of Hammurabi and his empire poses a central enigma. To what extent might writing have shaped not only the destiny of Babylon, but also the perception of power in Mesopotamia? As the echoes of Babylon's rise resonated throughout the region, cuneiform writing solidified as an essential pillar in the construction of a legacy that would transcend generations. Hammurabi not only dreamed of the greatness of his empire, he was also aware that his history would be written with every decision, every decree, every victory. The next stage in the evolution of writing and its impact on subsequent civilizations awaited in the shadows. And the resurgence of writing would be the next great mystery to unravel. The rise of Babylon would usher in a new dawn for cuneiform writing. As the Sumerian city-states crumbled under the weight of invasions and political changes, an echo of the past began to resonate in the surrounding lands. In a context of uncertainty, the cultures that followed Sumer, such as the Acadians and Babylonians, would seize this legacy, adapting and transforming the writing that had emerged from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. This chapter, The Resurgence of Writing, invites us to explore how cuneiform writing was preserved and reinvented by later civilizations, becoming a bridge between eras and cultures. The historical context preceding this resurrection is marked by the fall of the great Sumerian empires. By the end of the 3rd millennium before Christ, Sumer had experienced a political and social collapse. The competition among city-states had led to wars and ultimately to the invasion of peoples such as the Acadians, who eventually consolidated as one of the hegemonic powers in the region. The rise of Sargon of Akkad, a formidable leader who unified the city-states under a single authority, was a decisive moment. Under his command, cuneiform writing not only survived but found new applications and meanings. In a world where communication and administration were vital for territorial control, writing emerged as an essential instrument. The key figures of this era are diverse and complex. Sargon of Akkad, as the founder of the Acadian Empire, was not only a conqueror but also a visionary who understood the power that writing could grant to his government. His decisions to institutionalize cuneiform writing and use it for the administration of the empire were fundamental. Meanwhile, his grandson, Naram-Sin, would continue this tradition, expanding the use of cuneiform in terms of religion, culture, and governance. However, it was not only military leaders who played a crucial role. The scribes, with their expertise in handling writing, became the true architects of knowledge and bureaucracy, ensuring that Sumerian traditions did not fade away over time. As the Acadians settled into power, the development of events that would lead to the adaptation of cuneiform writing became inevitable. The Acadians, by adopting the Sumerian writing system, not only used it for their own administrative purposes but also began to simplify and modify the signs. This was a process of adaptation that reflected the need to unify the different languages and dialects of an expanding empire. Thus, cuneiform transformed and its use extended beyond simple accounting, encompassing literature, religion, and science. In fact, the epic poem of Gilgamesh, which had been written in cuneiform, was translated and reinterpreted in the Akkadian context, ensuring its enduring legacy. The immediate consequences of this adaptation were profound. Writing became a symbol of power and culture, uniting peoples under the authority of Sargon and his successors. Bureaucracy expanded, and with it the capacity to govern and administer vast and diverse lands. Writing also allowed for the continuity of cultural traditions which would influence later civilizations, such as the Babylonians and Assyrians. In this context, cuneiform writing became a common thread that connected generations and territories, a legacy that would withstand the test of time. However, the enigma of this chapter lies in how this writing, which had emerged as a means for administration and control, also became a vehicle for artistic and literary expression. What secrets awaited in the folds of those clay tablets which housed not only accounts and records but also the yearnings, fears, and hopes of a people? How did a form of communication transform into a symbol of cultural identity? The questions persist, challenging our understanding of the role of writing in the human realm. As we delve into the next stage of this journey, we will observe how the resurgence of cuneiform writing not only reconfigured the economic and political life of the civilizations that adopted it, but also became an essential tool for the consolidation of power across subsequent empires. Writing, in its purest essence, stood not only as a means of communication, but as the very foundation upon which the history of humanity would be built. That adaptation of cuneiform writing was not only limited to the preservation of Sumerian knowledge, but also became a fundamental pillar for the development of later empires. In the vast landscape of ancient history, writing emerged as a powerful tool, capable of consolidating the power of kings and governments, transforming into the fabric that connected the various facets of political and social life. Thus, while the echoes of the past resonated through the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the new actors of history began to understand that writing was not simply a means of communication, but a vehicle of control. The historical context surrounding this phenomenon is of vital importance. The fall of the Sumerian city-states marked the beginning of a new era in which empires such as Babylon and Assyria rose, taking advantage of the Sumerian legacy. With the unification of territories under a single command, the need for effective administration and clear communication became imperative. Writing became the beating heart of this new organization, an indispensable resource in the governmental structure that, in turn, reflected the leaders' desire to establish their authority definitively. Babylonian kings, such as Hammurabi, understood that a written code like the famous Code of Hammurabi was not only a form of justice but also a declaration of power, a clear message that the king was the supreme arbiter of social order. Among the key figures of this transformation is Sargon of Akkad, whose figure stands as a giant in history. founder of the Acadian Empire. Sargon used writing to consolidate his power over the Sumerian city-states he had conquered. In his inscriptions, he proclaimed his greatness and the divinity of his mandate, making it clear that writing was a means of propaganda as effective as an army. With each inscribed tablet, Sargon wove a narrative in which his figure intertwined with history itself, solidifying his legacy through words that would endure long beyond his time. The key events in this story of power and writing unfolded as empires expanded and kings sought ways to control their subjects. The creation of administrative archives, where essential documents about tributes, lands, and population were stored, became common. These archives were not only useful for administration, but also served as constant reminders of the king's authority. Through writing, rulers could record promises, alliances, and disagreements, maintaining a tight grip on their empire. The famous tablet of the conquest of Mari, for example, not only narrates the story of a battle, but also reaffirms the king's authority over his newly acquired territories. The immediate consequences of this era of writing and power were profound. The consolidation of centralized control meant that communication became more efficient and effective, decisions were made more quickly, and the orders of kings reached far and wide across the empire, while bureaucracy grew in complexity. However, this new order also brought with it an increase in oppression. The voices of conquered peoples were often silenced in the echo of the tablets, and writing, which had been a tool of knowledge, became an instrument of control. But what mysteries remain hidden behind this strategic use of writing? The history of writing an empire raises intriguing questions. Was writing a tool of liberation or oppression? How did it influence the perception of power among social classes, and what legacy did it leave in the relationship between rulers and the ruled? The answers to these questions are lost in the mists of time, leaving a riddle that invites reflection. Thus, as empires expanded and writing became an integral part of daily life, the shadow of its influence loomed over the future. Cuneiform writing, like a mighty river, continued to flow, carrying with it not only records of triumphs but also of injustices and struggles. This legacy would continue its journey, evolving and transforming as time progressed. As cuneiform firmly settled in the history of Mesopotamia, other writing systems began to emerge in different parts of the world. In the next chapter, we will delve into the decline of cuneiform and explore the reasons behind its fall, as well as the emergence of new forms of communication that would mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. What secrets awaited in the twilight of cuneiform? The imperial use of writing would soon face its own decline. Cuneiform, a system that had been the cornerstone of Mesopotamian civilization for millennia, was beginning to show signs of deterioration. As political and social structures changed, cuneiform, which had been a vehicle for knowledge and administration, started to lose its preeminent place. The transition to new forms of writing cast a shadow over the ancient temples, where the echoes of the earliest inscriptions once resonated. Contextually, the period preceding this transformation was marked by political instability and the emergence of new powers in the region. Following the era of the great Mesopotamian empires, other kingdoms and peoples began to consolidate their influence, bringing with them variations in administrative and cultural practices. In this environment of competition and change, the need for a more accessible writing system became evident. The new elites, in their quest to unify and expand their reach, began to seek alternatives that would facilitate communication beyond traditional borders. Among the key factors that played a role in this transition was the growing interaction with peoples who used other writing systems. The Aramaic alphabet, for example, was becoming the lingua franca of the Near East. Its simplicity, based on a limited number of letters representing sounds, contrasted sharply with the hundreds of signs of cuneiform. This represented an undeniable advantage for trade and large-scale administration. The development of events leading to the decline of cuneiform can be observed in the expansion of Phoenician writing and subsequently Aramaic, an alphabetical system that was beginning to gain ground along trade routes. This new method, simpler and more direct, presented itself as an attractive alternative, especially for merchants and administrators seeking quick and effective means of communication. In this context, cuneiform, with its intricate network of signs, seemed increasingly obsolete, a relic of a time that no longer fit the needs of the present. The immediate consequences of this transition were profound. The administration that had relied on cuneiform to keep records, conduct transactions, and establish laws began to adopt the new alphabetical systems. The scribes, once revered for their skill and knowledge of cuneiform, faced an uncertain future in a world that seemed to prefer the simplicity of the alphabetical. The knowledge that had been carefully documented on clay tablets began to fade into a sea of new inscriptions that, while effective, lacked the deep echo of cuneiform. But what secrets still awaited in the depths of this change? The question lingers. Was cuneiform truly surpassed by its complexity, or was its decline more related to the social and political paradigm shift that was unfolding in the region? Did the quest for a more accessible writing system signify the loss of an invaluable legacy, a knowledge that had been the thread connecting Mesopotamian civilization? As cuneiform faded, the echo of its legacy remained vibrant, waiting to be rediscovered. The history of writing is not only the history of a system, but of a civilization caught between tradition and innovation, between the past and the future. The decline of cuneiform marks a crucial turning point in the narrative of Mesopotamia. As alphabetical writing began to flourish, the search to rediscover and understand the vast legacy of cuneiform writing became increasingly urgent. In the next chapter, we will explore the archaeological discoveries that brought back to modern knowledge the history of Sumer and its writing, unearthing hidden truths in the folds of time. That decline of cuneiform, far from being the end of its story, would open the door to a resurgence of curiosity about Sumeria in the 19th century. In a context of scientific fervor and a renewed interest in ancient civilizations, archaeologists and explorers ventured into the lands of Mesopotamia, a territory that had been for centuries forgotten among the sands of time. But what secrets still awaited in the depths of this land of gods and kings? The 19th century witnessed a revival of knowledge, driven by figures such as the British Austin Henry Layard, who in 1845 began excavating in Nineveh, the ancient Assyrian capital. However, it was in the lands of Sumeria, in places like Ur and Uruk, where the most revealing remnants of a civilization that had been until then only an echo in history were discovered. This quest was not merely about unearthing artifacts. It was an attempt to recover a lost legacy, to understand the impact of cuneiform writing and its role in the evolution of humanity. The excavation of the ancient Sumerian cities revealed more than their discoverers could have imagined. Clay tablets, cuneiform inscriptions, and funerary monuments emerged from the earth, each telling stories of a world that had flourished in the fertility of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Among these findings, the famous Table of Numbers and the Epic of Gilgamesh appeared as beacons of forgotten knowledge, allowing archaeologists to glimpse the complexity of Sumerian life. But who were the men and women behind these discoveries? One of the key figures in this revival of interest in Sumeria was the British archaeologist Leonard Woolley. In 1922, Woolley began his famous excavation in Ur, where he unearthed the tomb of Queen Puabi, a finding that not only evidenced the wealth of Sumerian culture, but also highlighted the sophistication of its funerary system. The opulence of the objects found, from jewelry to gold utensils, revealed a society that valued both life and death. Woolley did not just discover artifacts, he unearthed a narrative of power, religion, and daily life. As archaeologists continued their work, the decisions made by governments and institutions also played a crucial role. The creation of museums, such as the British Museum, allowed for the preservation and exhibition of these findings, making knowledge accessible and bringing the public closer to a history that had remained silent for millennia. However, this process was not without controversy. the issue of the repatriation of Sumerian artifacts became a hot topic, challenging the ethics of archaeology and the right of nations to their own cultural heritage. The events of this rediscovery had immediate and profound consequences. The re-evaluation of Sumeria not only illuminated the origins of writing but also shed light on the development of civilization itself. Cuneiform writing, a fundamental tool for administration and communication, became a symbol of the evolution of human thought. Yet as this knowledge was recovered, new questions arose. Do we truly understand the complexity of Sumerian life? Or do we continue to project our own interpretations onto a context that we cannot fully grasp? The enigma of the chapter lies in the relationship between the past and the present. Despite advances in archaeology and history, many parts of the Sumerian narrative remain a mystery. Cuneiform writing, although largely deciphered, still holds secrets waiting to be revealed. What more could Sumeria teach us about ourselves and our place in history? Thus, as curiosity about the past expands, the shadow of Sumeria remains, challenging future explorers and thinkers to continue probing. Its legacy is not only a testament to the invention of writing, but also a reminder of the fragility of human memory and the eternal quest for knowledge. This rediscovery of Sumeria will be just the beginning of a journey that will lead us to explore the lasting impact of its writing on human civilization. With each new discovery, questions multiply and stories intertwine, guiding us to the next stage of this captivating narrative. What legacies endure in our current culture, and how have they transformed over the centuries? In the following chapter, we will delve into the enduring influence of Sumerian writing on the development of civilization, reflecting on how this ancient system of communication has shaped human thought and the structure of our societies. In the echo of the ancient channels of Sumerian civilization, where the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates once flowed with strength, we find a legacy that transcends time. As we delve into this final chapter, the history we have explored unfolds before us like an intricate tapestry, woven with threads of knowledge, innovation, and mystery. Cuneiform writing, created in the shadows of temples and clay tablets, has left an indelible mark on the narrative of humanity. The history of Sumeria is not merely a tale of achievements and failures, but a journey through the evolution of human thought. In a historical context where the struggle for power, religion, and economy intertwined in a complex social fabric, the Sumerians emerged as pioneers of writing, an invention that would change the course of civilization. In the city-states of Uruk and Ur, in the bustle of markets and the solemnity of temples, the Sumerians began to record their existence, their dreams, and their challenges. The figures who shaped this intellectual renaissance were many. From the kings who propelled the creation of the first legal codes such as Ur-Nammu, to the anonymous scribes who, with their hands, traced symbols on clay tablets. Each of them, through their decisions, contributed to a legacy that would resonate in future eras. How could a simple series of marks on clay become the foundation of human communication? What secrets lay within the first words that took shape in cuneiform? As we venture further back in time, the decisions made in the palaces of Sumeria began to reverberate through the civilizations that followed. The Sumerian influence on the Akkadians and Babylonians, who adopted and adapted cuneiform, is evident in the continuity of the use of this writing. In the 20th century before Christ, when the Babylonian Empire rose in power, tablets became vehicles for ideas and laws that crossed borders, uniting cultures in a fabric of exchange and understanding. The development of these innovations was not an isolated act. It was a gradual process where each written word became a bridge to the future. With each tablet, not only were commercial transactions solidified, but also the narratives that defined humanity. Literature, science, and administration found their voice in Sumerian writing. But how? Despite its apparent fragility, could this legacy endure through the centuries, resisting the passage of time and the forces of forgetfulness? The immediate consequences of writing were palpable. The organization of society transformed. Knowledge became accessible and history began to be recorded. Treaties of peace, creation myths, codes of conduct, and scientific innovations were inscribed on tablets, preserving the collective memory of a humanity in constant evolution. However, the enigma persists. What of those stories has reached us, and what has been irretrievably lost in the sands of time? The legacy of Sumerian writing is not just a historical fact, it is a mystery that invites reflection. Can we conceive the magnitude of its impact on our current civilization? Writing, in its most primitive form, laid the foundations for critical thinking, artistic expression, and complex communication. The echoes of those first words still resonate in our pages, in our books, in our screens. Every time a child learns to write, every time an idea takes shape on paper, homage is paid to the ancient Sumerians who, with their genius, initiated an irreversible path. The influence of cuneiform writing is felt not only in the cultures that followed Sumeria, but also in the structures of power and knowledge that form the basis of our contemporary society. From the legal system to education, through science and literature, every aspect of our daily lives bears the imprint of those ancient innovators. Yet the question remains, have we catapulted writing into a future without limits? Or are we simply repeating the echoes of a past that will never completely fade away? Through the centuries, cuneiform adapted, but its essence remained. From the palaces of Ur to the libraries of Babylon, Sumerian knowledge was preserved, reinterpreted, and transmitted. In the centuries that followed, the Greek and Roman civilizations, as well as the cultures of Asia and Africa, sought inspiration in the legacy of Sumeria. Writing, a means to document the human experience, became the thread that connects the history of humanity. Today, as we explore the remnants of this ancient civilization, we find more than just clay tablets. We discover a mirror in which we reflect our own aspirations and challenges. Sumerian writing speaks to us of a time when humanity sought to understand its surroundings and leave its mark on the world. This desire to leave a legacy, to tell stories, lies at the heart of our existence. As we close this final chapter, it is vital to remember that the legacy of Sumeria is not merely a testament to a lost time, but a reminder of what we can achieve when creativity and curiosity meet. Sumerian writing, with its enigmatic beauty and profound influence, has shaped the course of human civilization. It invites us to question, to explore, and to connect through words, uniting generations and cultures in an endless dialogue. And so, in the twilight of our journey through the history of Sumeria, we face one last reflection. What will our legacy be? What stories will we write on the vast canvas of humanity that will endure? Like those of the Sumerians, to be discovered by future generations. Ultimately, the mystery of writing becomes a testament to our innate desire to be heard and understood. In every word we utter and in every story we share, we find the essence of what it means to be human, an echo that endures beyond time and space.